Hello everybody, I'm Nora Burrows. A while back I made a video called Watch What I Make with These Scraps Triangles. And I made these really cool triangles out of scraps, go figure. I have been holding on to those for a while and today I want to use them. I have a pretty cool idea, I think, in terms of how to lay them out and what to do next. So let's go, take a look. I have 8 of these triangles and I do have an idea of how I want to space them out. I have kind of a layout that I think could be pretty awesome. So these are just a quick look. I made these in that other video that you can check out. And then what I'm going to pair with these once I kind of lay them out in my cool formation is I have these black and white prints that I think that I want to use next. Here's how I want to lay these out, I think. You can ignore these pieces over here. That's a different project. But I'm going to start sewing also these 3 pieces together, these 3 pieces together, and then connect this unit to this unit. I'll have a big hexagon at that point, and then I'll sew the top and bottom on. After I do that, we'll take a look at what to do next with those black and white scraps. This center piece here is now 1 unit, and I think I'm going to put a border of this black and white floral. I love this print. Now, unfortunately, I think I have enough to go all the way around, but this is actually not 1 long piece. It's actually 2 pieces I just put up against each other. I don't have very long pieces of it. I just kind of have a bunch of chunks. So I'm gonna have to piece some of that. So I'll have a seam kind of in the middle of each side, but that's okay. I'm not too worried about that. I'm gonna do that next. Piece these together to be nice long strips, and then I'll attach a strip to the top, to the bottom, and then to the top and the bottom of the other side. Here's how the piece is looking now. I added on this gray border along this whole diamond here, and then obviously put on the sides of this black and white fabric. I think what I'm going to do is kind of trim off the top, bottom, left and right so that this diamond kind of disappears and you focus really on that internal diamond there. Then I need to think about what I want to add on next. I've trimmed the top, bottom, left, and right, and now I've created kind of this coffin shape. I have experimented with putting some of these fabrics around. This, I've also put a strip of this gray, the same gray that I outlined here. I haven't sewn this on yet, but I've kind of placed it just to see how it would look, and I think I like that. It adds a little bit of definition. So I'm gonna sew one of these gray strips onto each one of these sides, and then pick kind of what I'm gonna do for these corners here. I am, even though these kind of are more of the color scheme with the central piece, I am kind of drawn to these bright colors up here, especially how the fabrics create this diagonal. This is a Kaffe Fassett print, and I only have a fat quarter of it, but I have another fat quarter in a different colorway. So I could kind of do, you know, the top and bottom diagonals in this colorway, and then the top and bottom in the other colorway. But first I'm going to sew on each of these gray strips, and then I'll make a decision about the corners. I am loving this so much. I almost just want to put a binding on and be done with it, but it is kind of on the smaller side. But I think that this black and white here, separating the you know, massive amount of color and then the color on the sides, and then these triangle slash stripey slash square things in the corners, I'm worried about messing it up at this point. But I think what I'm going to do is put a little very thin border of something along the whole outside of it, and then maybe do something pieced. So I need to think about that. I've decided what I'm going to do next is a series of borders. So the first border that I'll do is this charcoal gray, this one here that I've used around the diamond, and then I used it around this kind of outer diamond, and then I'll just do a very thin border around the full quilt top here. Then I've pulled a bunch of these fabrics, kind of pinks, navies, purples, that I used inside, like little crumbs inside of each of these triangles. I pulled some of those. So I think I'll just kind of continue borders out of some of these fabrics. Here's just a close-up of how this is looking at this point, and then I wanted to show you a close-up of some of these fabric. So for this one here, I would just use the strip of pink in the middle. You can see that, let's see, in one of these triangles, I used that piece right here at the top. Actually is that that print here, and I just did it in a couple other triangles, I think, as well. So then these are the fabrics that I've pulled to go as possible borders. I wanted to show you something here. I'm going to be attaching more than one border. So I'll have this gray border and then the blue border next and maybe borders beyond that. But what I did is I attached this side border on both right and left sides. And then instead of attaching the top and bottom gray next, I first attached the gray to my next border. And then that means I can put this full piece onto the body of my quilt, which means I don't have to struggle with putting this piece on to the body and then struggling with putting this piece onto the body. It just makes it a little bit easier. So just like before, this is not attached. And then I sewed this light blue strip to the floral strip, and then I'll attach this full strip to this. Instead of putting on one border, then another border, then another border, then this border, it just means that, like I said before, I can sew this off the main body of the quilt and then attach it. I really love how this looks right now, and I kind of want to keep it as is, but it's still kind of on the smallish side. It's 60 long by 40 wide. So for a throw, it is a little small, but I am hesitant to do anything else. So everything is attached except the bottom border here and the top border there. I've added on an additional blue, a little bit darker than this inner one, another blue border here. And then I kind of just want to finish it out with an outer border. Now I have a couple choices. This is kind of a little dull in my opinion, especially considering some of these really vibrant colors. This one is a little bit more interesting, but I think what I'm going to try is to use pieces of this one and then maybe use some pieces of Cafe prints and mix them with this. So I'm going to try that and see what I think. If that doesn't work, I'll probably just go with this border all the way around. I've decided to try something. I have these leftover strips from a jelly roll that I used actually just a couple videos ago. And I want to sew these, I think, just directly next to each other and then see what's next. I've sewn 3 strips together here, and what I'm going to do is line up my hexagon template along my strip, and then I'm going to trim it. And here's my hexagon, and what I'm going to do next, this is just an experiment. I'm going to just do 1 or 2 of these, see if I like them. I'm not committed to this in any way. But I want to take this navy William Morris fabric, and William Morris, it has a much different feel than the Cafe. As you know, with any of these bright prints like the Cafe prints, Tula Pink, Anna Marie Horner, I really like to pair them with things that are much different, as is William Morris here. So I'm going to cut triangles to go in these 4 corners. That's my next step. Here's my little trial hexagon, and I do not care for that at all. Let me back up and I'll show it to you a little bit farther away so you can see the whole thing. There it is. I'm trying to picture those, you know, kind of all lined up, a bunch of them, and it doesn't work for me at all. So I'm going to go with either this one or this one. Here's 2 last options, and I think I'm going to go with this one. I don't remember if I showed you this at the beginning of the video, but early on, I was considering this for the piece to go around here that I ultimately used the black and white. And I actually, you know, I'd put it aside, and I actually think this could be it because it ties that kind of bright pinks and oranges from these other sections into the border. The other one is this, but there's no blue in this, so it feels very abrupt from this blue border. So that's what I'm thinking, but this is what I'm pretty sure I'm gonna go with. And here's a close-up of this border here. It's very Art Deco-like. It has kind of this building feel with these rays coming off of this little peak and the arrows. Really interesting. I'm not sure it's the perfect fit, but I think it might be the best option. I decided to do a pieced border, and what I did is I took my strips that I had created for making those hexagons, and I instead just trimmed them 4 inches long, 4.5 inches long actually, and then I'm lining them up along the right and left hand side, and then I cut more to be about 2.5 inches, and then I'm lining those up along the top and the bottom. So these are all in pairs of 3 right now, and as you can see, I still need to make some more of them, and then I'll start sewing all of these together. Here it is with the pieced border. I have mixed feelings about it. I don't deeply dislike it. I also am not totally sold on it, but I think it will be okay. And I do want to add some sort of border along the outside, maybe just another one of these thin blue ones or something like that, just because there's so many seams that when you're putting the binding on and sandwiching it together, it's just a lot of seams to deal with. So I am going to add something else. I will say this is the first quilt I have ever made that does not lie perfectly flat. It is a little bit ribbed in the middle, and the only thing I can think about why that is that, you know, typically every time I kind of expand out, I square it up. And I think that perhaps in one of the steps, in one of the borders I put on, it didn't get squared up. Also, the more borders you add on, and I have a lot of little borders. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 borders here. Every time you add a border, it does kind of get a little bit wonky. So perhaps I just kind of overdid it with the borders, but it's not horrible. It lies pretty flat. Hopefully it'll quilt out, but let me think what I'm gonna do next. Here is the finished piece. I did put the final border on this 1.5-inch gray strip. It's hard to see because it's the same color as the floor, but it's the same gray that's kind of in this internal piece of the quilt in various parts. So the quilt top is done. It just needs to have the quilt sandwich made, the binding done. I'm going to bind it in the same color blue as this kind of darker blue right here, so that will tie it all together. I think this is a very cool piece. I'm very happy with it. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. I will see you next time.